All right, hello class, welcome to 9.3. Hopefully you're joining me after finishing the lab, or maybe it's the next day and you're joining me a little time after. And you went through Wireshark and have a better understanding of how TCP actually functions, but now let's talk about why it matters and why we care about this reliability and why TCP is such a vital function for information being moved from your network to your applications and vice versa. Um, so this is more of the why after the how it works. So TCP reliability, guaranteed and ordered delivery. Again, I wish I could get that guaranteed and ordered delivery whenever I shop online, right? TCP is way better than even Amazon. I know, hard to believe. Amazon is very good at delivering their goods, but they also follow a very step-by-step process, and they've really changed the shipping median because they are so ordered. So I like to think, they saw what TCP was doing, and they're like, wow, that is a good way to make sure that our packages are getting there on time to each destination. TCP is all about, order and timeliness. So hey, maybe we can all learn a lesson from TCP. Anyway, there may be times when TCP segments do not arrive at the destination or arrive out of order. So what happens? The original message to be understood by the recipient, all the data must be received. It's like getting a letter, but every other word is cut out. It's going to be very difficult to decipher it. That's not a good way to read a letter or even deliver one, right? So the data in these segments must be reassembled in their original order. That's the whole point of the sequence. So sequence numbers are assigned in the header for each packet. So each piece has a number on it that says this is this order to achieve this goal. The sequence numbers represent the first data byte of the TCP segment. So it's right at the front. So it knows to slice that part off because that is just the sequence number. We don't need that bit actually going into the data. So during session setup, an initial sequence number, ISN, is set, which represents the starting value of the bits that are transferred to the receiving application. As data is transmitted during the session, the sequence number is incremented by the number of bits that have been transmitted. So from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, on and onward, right? So this data byte tracking enables each segment to be uniquely identified and acknowledged, and missing segments can then easily be identified because we've acknowledged, I've already said in the previous section, we've acknowledged 1 through 30, but we don't have 33, 37, and 42, and we have 50 total segments. So since those ones weren't acknowledged, they will be sent again by TCP, and then again easily slotted into place because they have a number. So the ISN is effectively a random number which prevents certain types of malicious attacks. So it doesn't necessarily start at 1, it's just starting at the beginning increment and then incrementing up from there, and that's how it determines that it's the starting number. That's to keep someone from sneaking in more data than there should be or taking data out that shouldn't be taken out, right? So segment sequence numbers indicate how to reassemble and reorder. The receiving TCP processes places data in the segment in a receiving buffer and then assembles it from there. And then any segments that arrive with sequence numbers that are out of order are held for later processing. So we start stacking them up first, and then after they've been stacked up, we make sure that they're in order. And if they're not, we move them to where they need to go. Okay, here's a video. Again, go ahead and jump on Netacad. It's going to show you, one of the main functions is to make sure all the segments get there. Give you a second to watch it. Okay, I assume you're back. So let's keep moving. So TCP reliability, data loss and retransmission. TCP provides methods of managing the segment losses by retransmitting the segments for unacknowledged data. Again, if they're not said that the segments are taken and acknowledged, then we send them again. So the sequence number and acknowledgement number are used together to confirm the receipt of the bytes of data contained in the transmitted segments. So the sequence number shows the first byte of data and where it's being transmitted, and then TCP uses the acknowledge number, so our acknowledge flag, sent back to the source to indicate the next byte that the receiver expects to receive. So if it gets, hey, I'm expecting number 72 and you're only on 40, well, then we're out of order, and sometimes that's when there might be a reset, or the reset flag is used if it becomes completely out of sync. So prior to later enhancement, TCP could only acknowledge the next byte expected. So here's an example. So host A is sending segments 1 through 10. So 1, 2, 3, acknowledge 3, segment 3, right? So what does that all mean? If all the segments arrive except segments 3 and 4, host B would reply with acknowledge, specifying that the next segment it's expected is segment 3. So if it's asking for segment 3, host A has no idea if any other segments arrive or not, so it'll just start from where it's expecting, right? So if it fired all these segments out, 1 through 10, but then B says, okay, I'm ready for 3 now. So you weren't listening from 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 up to 10, or where did you stop listening and where did the order go wrong? Okay, whatever, it doesn't matter. We'll start from where you're expecting and keep going from there. So if all the reset segments arrive successfully, segments 5 through 10 would be duplicates. This can lead to delays, congestion, and inefficiencies. So host operating systems employ an optional TCP feature. So that's how TCP used to work, is it just fires it all off again, called selective acknowledgement, so SAC, negotiated during the three-way handshake. If both hosts support SAC, so this is one of the ways they've enhanced TCP, the receiver can acknowledge which segments were received, including any discontinuous segments. So it'll say these 10 get fired out, and it got 5 through 10. They did get received, but we're still expecting 3. SAC will add a little extra, pretty much a flag saying, okay, you don't need to resend these. We got these. Just, hey, I'm expecting 3, though. I still need that. So we're only retransmitting a little segment rather than the entire blast of data, right? So if the figure host A sends segments 1 through 10 to host B, if all segments arrive except for segment 3 and 4, host B can acknowledge that it received segments 1 and 2, ACK 3, and selectively acknowledge. So again, that's the selective, so SAC, selective acknowledgement. Sometimes a little easier to remember that way. It's just the ACK flag with an S because it's selective. Host A would only need to resend 3 and 4, again, making our network happy and our IT team less upset that we're blasting so much data through, even though it's being repetitive. Okay, another video. Give you a second to watch your Netacad. Probably just keep it up near me. I assume you guys do that. And I assume we're good to go on. So here we go. So TCP flow control, window size, and acknowledgements. So TCP also provides mechanisms for flow control, as we've seen. Flow control is the amount of data that the destination can receive and process reliably, either at a time or in total. So flow control helps maintain the reliability of the transmission by adjusting the rate of data flow between source and destination. To accomplish this, it has in its 20-bit header, we have the 16-bit field called the window size. The window size that determines the number of bytes that can be sent before expecting an acknowledgement. So how big of a segment before we're expecting a yes, that we got it, right? So acknowledgement number is the number of the next expected byte. The window size is the number of bytes that the destination device of a TCP session can accept and process at one time. So pretty much just how big of a window do we have to send as much data as we can across the median before we need to cap it off and get an acknowledgement. So window size is included in every TCP segment, so the destination can modify the window size at any time depending on buffer availability, so how much it can handle to start processing and putting in order. So the initial window size is agreed upon during the three-way handshake, and the source device must limit the number of bytes sent to the destination based on the window size, because if it sends us too much, we might get some overflow, or it just straight up won't be able to accept the information. So the destination will not wait for all the bytes for its window size to receive before replying with an acknowledgement. As the bytes are received and processed, the destination will send acknowledgements to inform the source that it continued to send additional bytes. So destination sending acknowledgements as it processes bytes received, and the continual adjustment of the source send window is known as sliding windows. It's just a way to keep data flowing as optimally as possible. So if the availability of the destination's buffer space decreases, they'll say, okay, send me a little less because I'm still chewing on this, right? And then it says, okay, I'm done chewing on that, and you gave me a little less then, so I'm good for another full portion again. I'm hungry again for a full bite. It may reduce its window size to inform the source to reduce the number of bytes it should send without receiving an acknowledgement. We'll say if a computer is getting blasted with tons and tons of connections, window size will be reduced so that I can keep all of those pieces of information ordered in the buffer. So devices today use the sliding windows protocol. The receiver sends an acknowledgement after every 2 segments it receives. The advantage of sliding windows is that it allows the sender to continuously transmit segments, so we're not losing our session. We're still flowing through, but we just don't want to have to either oversize or undersize. We want it to be just the optimal amount the buffer can handle. So that's why sliding window is very helpful. So maximum segment size, so MSS, In the figure, the source is transmitting 1460 bytes of data within each TCP segment, which is the maximum segment size. Even if it says, hey, give me the biggest burger you have, we're still only going to give them a burger worth 1460 because that's just the limit of the TCP protocol in terms of segment size. So the MSS is a part of the options field in the header that specifies it as the largest amount of data in bytes that a device can receive in a single segment. If it ever says, even if the window size is, as you can see here, 10,000, so we're ready to eat, right? But we still need to make sure these segments are only these sizes because my mouth's only so big. I can eat 1,000 chicken nuggets, but I can't eat 1,000 chicken nuggets at a time. I'm hungry for them, but I can't eat them at once. I need to eat one nugget at a time, right? So the MSS size does not include the header, and then the MSS is included during the three-way handshakes, also during the discussion when we're making that session. Okay, so TCP flow control, we're just talking about it a little more. So it's used IPv4, and then on an Ethernet interface, the is 1500 bytes, subtracting the IPv4 header of 20 bytes and the TCP header of 20 bytes. That's where we get the 1460 bytes. Pretty much the maximum amount of space we can send because we got to give enough room for the header information for the control of the different protocols here, TCP and IPv4 and Ethernet. So congestive avoidance. When congesting occurs on a network, it results in packets being discarded by the overloaded router because it can't take on anymore. And that's why it's important that TCP acknowledges and make sure that there's data, because the two devices might be fine and running optimally, but the actual network itself might be dropping packets because it's getting completely overloaded. That's why we love this reliability of TCP, and why say you're watching a stream video and you see frames dropping and it's cutting in and out. That's because most streaming uses UDP, and it isn't making sure that the data is in order because it's just trying to keep that data stream going. That's what UDP's whole best effort delivery is. And it's very likely that your router or your network is having congestion problems, too many people downloading other things, and it's dropping frames or dropping these packets that are going through your router because of congestion. So whether there is congestion, retransmission of lost TCP segments from the source will occur. So if the retransmission is not properly controlled, the additional retransmission of segments can make the congestion even worse. That's why selective acknowledgement is important. Not only are new packets with TCP segments introduced to the network, but the feedback effect of retransmitted. So again, it's still throwing things out, and then it's retransmitting things. And then if it keeps dropping, it keeps saying, okay, well, I got to keep retransmitting. And as you can see, it can snowball into a big problem. So to avoid and control congestion, TCP employs several congestion handling mechanisms, such as timers and algorithms. So if the source determines that TCP segments are either not being acknowledged or not acknowledged in a timely manner, then it can reduce the number of bytes it sends before receiving an acknowledgement. As shown, PCA senses there's congestion and therefore reduces the number of bytes it sends before acknowledgement. And then acknowledgement numbers are for the next expected byte and not for a segment. Segment numbers used are simplified for illustration purposes. So again, we're only in segment 1, even though it's probably segment 4,742 or whatever, however many we're sending. Okay. So our last lab of this section, let me go and pull it up. All right. So Nmap is another really powerful tool that you should get familiar with. It's often used in cyber attacks as well as reconnaissance, as well as just network hardening as well, because it's really good to see what ports are open. You're often going to deploy Nmap across your own network to see for your own vulnerabilities, because you want to be the one to catch them before the malicious actors do. So as I was mentioning previously, ports are good to open only when absolutely necessary and being used. There's no reason to have ports open if you are not using them. So Nmap helps point out, hey, you got ports open here, here, and here. Are you expecting packages? No? Well, then close your doors, lock your windows, right? So we're going to explore how, the actual transport and connection to ports using Nmap to see, how it actually does its connection, but also be aware that this is explaining a bit on the cyber side of why it's important for Nmap to exist, to be scanned often against the network. A lot of the times, some automated systems are running Nmap constantly, either targeted servers. So say they're targeting Google, they're trying to use Nmap to see what ports are opening in Google to see if they can see a window for opportunity. Or internally, Google is making sure that these ports aren't being left open, or there's some process opening ports that shouldn't be. So Nmap's really useful. As with most of these labs, these tools are very helpful. So go ahead and jump on your CyberOps VM and complete this lab. So that is the end of chapter 9. Let me go back to the lecture. Do a quick summary here. Pretty much this was the transport layer, right? We learned how it connects, why it's important, the two different protocols, which is TCP, UDP, and TCP being stateful and reliable. That's the biggest thing, is to know the difference here is stateful. So it monitors the state of the connection. It's seeing how things are going. And reliable because it has ways to correct data if it's not going well, right? UDP is stateless, doesn't care what's happening. It just fires out the data, and it's fast, which again is useful when you're trying to send these massive amounts of data and you're expecting a best effort delivery. UDP can be really helpful, as I mentioned, for streaming video or voice. So TCP and UDP transport layers use port numbers. We've every kind of layer on the OSI model has their own, unique, IP addresses, MAC addresses, whatever the important thing for that layer is. The important thing for the transport layer is the port numbers, because again, this is where our data is going to which application, and the transport layer knows where to deliver and package these up and then down to the network as well. The second most important, or the other really important thing, is understanding how a three-way handshake works, how TCP connections are actually made. We use our control bits to establish our connections, as well as some other functionality for TCP. And then host operating systems today have selective acknowledgement, so S for selective acknowledgement, which is negotiated during the handshake. Again, this is very helpful for reducing congestion, and flow control helps maintain reliability by adjusting the rate of data to make sure that the destination is able to handle the speed of the source that's trying to send it, right? All right, that is the end of Module 9. This one was a bit more of a doozy compared to 7 and 8. But we're almost done this network section, where you just have Module 10 moving forward. And then after that, there will be another checkpoint exam, and we'll move on to a different kind of focus in the class. So hopefully you're getting your fill of network stuff, because again, it's important to understand the network before we even start understanding attacks on the network, because we have to understand these underlying protocols to be able to combat at the base level. Otherwise, we're just kind of like, oh, someone's attacking your network. Well, what does that mean? Which part of it, and which protocol, and how are they exploiting it? So, all right. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know. I'll see you in the next video.